space is a place for us.
Real people with real issues.
Discussing real topics.
Black space.
A safe space for our community.
The black, two topics that are very, very, very difficult to talk about. They say you don't talk religion and politics. Well, I've had the opportunity to talk religion already, or politics rather. We're gonna talk a little religion. And you know, I will admit I have a little bias in this conversation. I am a devout Christian pretty much my entire life, with the exception of that woke period during college. But I won't really get into that. But in any event, we're going to talk about a very crazy topic, or a divisive topic, is, especially in the Black community, the Black church. Whether we're talking about, you know, the conversation about, you know, the quote unquote white Jesus, or, you know, the white man religion, or the prosperity gospel. Those are many things that many people talk about negatively about the Black church. But the Black church has played a positive role in the Black community dating way back to slavery, very instrumental in helping abolition, the very small Black church back then. And of course, we all know the very famous role it played in the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s. But the conversation is, let's talk about the current role, both positive and negative. And let's be open, let's be honest. I'm going to kick it off with you, George. I'll let you start this conversation. How do you feel currently? First of all, what do you think the current state of the Black church is currently?
Well, you know, I always like to start off with the positive like to start off with the strengths before I start evaluating the weaknesses. So I would much rather first acknowledge what the Black church has done and what it does continue to do before we like get into the current state of affairs of the Black church. Is it okay to do it that way?
Go ahead. Floor's yours.
Okay. So I see three areas where the Black church was directly a direct major resource, our go-to resource in our development. And the first of it was when we were initially brought over here as slaves. Before we could even read, before we even understood the language of the European. We had our own language, we had our own way of worship. We were innately spiritual. So at that point, obviously we depended on our spiritual belief to get through all of the trauma that was inflicted on our ancestors coming across the water. Then after we were allowed to learn how to read and learn how to read the King James version of the Bible, we then adopted that form of religion, and we used it. We've used it to its max, and it helped us get through abolishment when slavery was abolished. And we try to go out and figure out how do we move forward as a community as quote unquote free men. And then further into our development, the church was definitely integral in civil rights. I mean, most of our leaders were right out of the church in addressing civil rights. So in that way, the Black church has been key in those early developmental phases of our history with this country. Now, in terms of its current state, I think we're at a fork in the road because we're using age-old techniques for a brand new environment. The stuff that we're doing now, most of the Black churches, one of my roles is I serve as minister of music. I'm a musician, and I've worked in the church arena for quite a lengthy period of time. And what I can tell, with the exception of a few mega churches and other, healthy churches, the majority of our churches, the state they find themselves in, is a lack of legacy. The average Black church is attritioning out. It's dying out. The giving that most churches depend on is slowly attritioning off, and they have not made an official transfer of leadership to the newer generation. And so, go ahead.
No.
So that's our current state, because we have a lot of the old dogs, so to speak, still out there fighting, trying to push. But the generation they're trying to reach is not really hearing them right now.
As we transition, it seems that Karanji is about to join us. Having some technical. Oh, there he is. Karanji, good evening.
In the building.
Hey, man, how you doing? How you doing?
What's going on, brother?
Just a quick introduction. Joining us is Karanji Kaduma. Is it Kaduma?
Yes, Karanji Kaduma.
Karanji Kaduma. He's a high school teacher at River Rouge High in Detroit, Michigan, in the D. He's owner of Soul Capital 313 brand and band leader of Karanji's Soul Water. He's also a self-proclaimed unapologetic lover of the people. Should be a good conversation for you, Daniel.
Yes, sir.
Pros and cons of Black church currently.
All right. I'm not going to be as diplomatic, so I'm gonna just go right into the cons.
Get into it.
I actually think that as an institution, the role of the Black church has actually, the Black church has abdicated its responsibility to the community, by and large. Now, there are going to be some people that'll hop in the comments and they're going to say that they will point out to the one-offs. But what I like to do is I don't like to argue individual attainment. I like to drive through neighborhoods, our neighborhoods that have significant churches, church presence. And I don't like to do it on Sundays because they're always open on Sundays. I like to do it on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, those days of the week, and see what role they play in bettering their communities. And for me, a majority of them have actually abdicated that responsibility. There was a point where the church was a source of assistance and actually benefited the people for the community, and in a lot of ways, they've gotten away from that mission. And there are a lot of things I can say about that side of it, but I'm not going to touch too much on that now. We'll kind of get into that as we go a little bit deeper. Speaking to what the brother George just said about the attrition, it's a conversation I had recently with a pastor friend of my dad's, about the fact that a lot of the older generation refused to train up their replacements. And this is actually, for me, one of the significant criticisms that I had about the civil rights movement as well, where the same people that led the civil rights movement that were in their 20s when they led it are still the people that are in front of the microphones in 2019, well, those that are left over when things happen. And there's that tug between the old generation wanting to keep that power and not passing those lessons on to the younger generation and taking advantage of the energy of the younger generation. And that same issue is we largely see in the church environment, which has led to a lot of the attrition. But just staying away from the theology, I just feel that the Black church is actually probably best if it goes extinct. It's about time for it to go extinct, and it's about time for a community-focused organization to take its place.
I am wounded by that.
It's all right.
I definitely respect your opinion.
Context.
I want to say that without getting, I don't want to go too deep just yet because I want to get Brother Karanji's opinion on his pros and cons. But I will say that just kind of peeking into the next phase of this conversation, that the church is a microcosm of the community at large. But Brother Karanji, pros and cons of the current Black church.
Okay. Let me go with the pros first. The pros are that historically it was a bastion of comfort for our people in times of need. It was a major part of the Underground Railroad in the late 50s. Actually, before then, when you had much more radical examples of Christians, like you had the Deacons of Defense and those type of individuals who really were truly revolutionary revolutionary individuals who were really willing to arm our people, to defend our people against white supremacy and racism and oppression and basically terrorism from white people at that time. They were much more relevant. They also were also relevant as far as promoting Black businesses. They supported Black businesses. A lot of that money came back into the community. There was not this thing of really profiting from the community that you see today. I'm sure there were pastors that made good money back in that day as well, but that was it was not the main things. So those are the pros. I would also say that, there were a lot of community things that churches did as far as providing things for youth at one point. They had the church leagues, and, a lot of things like that. So I try to be balanced and not say that there's all negative. But overwhelmingly, I'm a science teacher. I'm a science person. And so I look at the overall progress of any institution in the Black community versus how much it has taken in versus how much it has given. And if we were to go from the 1970s on to now, it has taken way more than it has given. It says since 1980 that the church has taken in $420 billion. There's no other institution in the Black community that has taken in that amount of money with such a small amount of return. So to me, that is the crux of one of the main issues I have with the cons. Also, the idea that the church has also been one of the few institutions that we feel that most Black people have been very resistant to being critical of or holding accountable. We hold our schools accountable. We hold our businesses accountable. Yeah, we do. Cause if we have a bad school, we take our kids out of the school. We ain't going to that school in that neighborhood, in that hood. I'm taking my kid out of here. They going to school over here. So we take our kids out of those schools. We won't be. You have far more parents going to church, getting involved in church than they do in the schools. I'm a teacher. I had parent-teacher conference this past week. I had maybe 10 parents. Okay, just to give you an example of the accountability just to get a real example. But I promise you, you go to church, I might have 100 parents. I guarantee you it's far higher percentage of parents going to church than come to the parent-teacher conference. So that's just one example. To defend my cons. Also, it is like the brother said, Daniel said below, the church is no longer relevant to the Black community at the level it was once. It is on its way out. I do believe there's several institutions I think is on the way out that we are very, very resistant of acknowledging. The reason why I say that is because you look at how you determine if an institution is relevant or not. You look at how it affects those that are most disenfranchised, and you look at the young people.
Black Space, a safe space for our community.